This episode of Hops and Gnarly Brewing is sponsored by Yakima Valley Hops. Alright, here's a seemingly simple question. How do I max out the tropical fruit flavors in my hazy IPAs? Is it thiolized yeast, or hop extracts, or dip hopping? The truth is, I don't know of any silver bullets, but one thing I'm curious to experiment with is mash hopping. This is a technique that's exactly what it sounds like. You add hops to the mash and then remove them when you remove the grain. It's an old technique, but it's recently seen some renewed attention because it can introduce hop compounds that are converted or changed into thiols, or aromatic compounds that we perceive as tropical fruit and citrus. And getting back to my original question, it sounds like this technique can help me max out the tropical fruit flavors in my hazy IPAs. Now, let's make some beer. For this beer, I'm starting with some reverse osmosis water, and I'm building the water profile to match the hoppy New England IPA water profile in Brewfather. This is a pretty crucial step for this style, so make sure you slow it down and be intentional with your water choice here. For the grain bill, I'm going with 72% proximity base malt, which again is essentially a super pale 2-row. 11% malted oats, 11% flaked oats, and a little bit of dextrin malt for a total of 18 pounds of grain and a target original gravity of 1074. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's the same grain bill I used for my last hazy IPA. But since it was such a tight fit last time, I'm planning to use the Brewtools malt overflow pipe to make sure we don't run into any issues. I'm mashing this at 104 Fahrenheit or 40 Celsius, and I'll keep stirring everything in until it's nice and saturated. Then, it's time for the mash hop. The suggested mash hopping rate is about 2.5 ounces or around 70 grams per 5 gallons, but I'll be honest, I'm a little worried about that making the beer too bitter. I'm gonna start small with about an ounce this time, and I'll increase it if it doesn't turn out bitter. Now, we'll hang out at 104 for a minute before ramping up to our final mash temperature of 152, where I'll recirculate the wort for 45 minutes. While the mash finishes up, let's talk about Yakima Valley hops. Yakima Valley Hops is dedicated to bringing the best hops to brewers of every size. And that last part is what I love most. Today, I'll be using a hop product called Incognito, and until recently, the smallest amount you could buy was 2 kilograms or about 4.4 pounds. Lucky for us homebrewers, Yakima Valley Hops was willing to repackage Incognito into 20 milliliter containers. And that's just Incognito. They've been making great hops accessible since their start in 2012 and were my go-to hop supplier long before Hops and Gnarly. Check out the link in the description to learn more. Alright, we've been mashing for over an hour now. Time to yank these grains and get our boil started. With the basket up and out of the wort, I'm moving on to the Vorloff, where I'll recirculate the wort through the grain bed for about 10 minutes. You can do this with a pump like I am here, or you can manually pull wort from the kettle with a pitcher and dump it back over the grain bed. After about 10 minutes, I'm switching to a sparge manifold and rinsing the grains with a little over a gallon of water. Now, let's heat it up to a boil. For this recipe, I've shortened the typical 60-minute boil to just 20 minutes, and I won't be adding any hops during this step. As soon as those 20 minutes are up, I'm dropping the temperature to 170 Fahrenheit or about 77 Celsius for a step called the whirlpool. Now that we're down to temp, it's time for some hops. I've got 30 grams of Lupomax Citra and 30 grams of Enigma, but we're just getting started. I'm also adding 15 grams of Citra Incognito and 15 grams of Mosaic Incognito, which is the equivalent of about 6 ounces of hops. After a 20-minute spin, I'll cool the beer down and pitch the yeast. To complement the massive amount of hops, I'm going with a brand new offering from Imperial Yeast called Capri that combines the best qualities of 2 of their yeast strains, A38 Juice and A43 Loki. This should create some juicy ester aromatics, tropical fruit flavors, and bright citrus notes. And this time, I dry hopped 2 days before packaging with 90 grams each of Enigma and Lupomax Citra. But guys, I'm in a hurry to head out on vacation, so if you want to see how this turned out, you're just gonna have to come with me. All right, we made it to Arizona and I can't wait to try this beer. To recap, this beer started with some reverse osmosis water that I adjusted to have a high chloride to sulfate ratio. To that, I added a bunch of super pale 2-row, some oats, and some dextrin malt. After mashing at 152 Fahrenheit, I boiled for 20 minutes before adding an extreme amount of Incognito, some Lupomax Citra, and some super fresh Enigma. And if that wasn't enough, I went with a brand new yeast strain, dry hopped with even more hops, and here's how it turned out. It's a golden yellow color with a beautiful white head, and the aroma is hard to explain because it smells like so many different fruits. I think there's definitely something here that wasn't present in the last batch, and I'm assuming that's from the mash hop. I really thought that would add a bunch of bitterness, but it hasn't. It has a big, soft body, tropical fruit and citrus flavors, and a mildly bitter finish. I dig it, and I think this will be a perfect beer to sip by the pool. Looking back on the brew day, I'm super happy with how this mash overflow pipe performed. I don't think this will improve your efficiency or something like that, but it does give you some peace of mind and makes it easier to multitask during the mash. And if you're thinking about brewing a mash hopped beer, I'd say shoot for that 70-gram threshold and don't even worry about it being bitter. As long as the hop material doesn't seep out into the kettle, I think everything will be fine. My name's Dan, this is Hops and Gnarly. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you again soon.